All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to talk about the Crossroads of Twilight. I always get this book confused with the Towers of Midnight. I think it's just the Twilight Midnight thing that just gets me caught up. But this is book 10, also known as the sloggiest of the slog. Uh, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to take a little bit of a different direction today. We're not going to go into the minute details of every chapter here. We're kind of going to go over, well, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the prologue because of how interesting it is. But
Yeah.
as far as like the next 10 chapters after that, we're just going to lightly cover kind of the events that are occurring and some of the major things that are happening at this portion of the book. But as right when we jump into this, we got Tristram here. Possibly Andrew might be showing up later, depending on his situation. But right off the bat, in the prologue, we get this character who becomes a major character in the later part of the series. Rodel Ituralda, I don't know that's what they call him in the audiobooks. What does he go by in your vernacular?
So how do I pronounce his name?
Yes.
I pronounce his name Rodel Ituralde.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we're just going to use our own
Yeah.
pronunciations. We're going to throw them out there. We're
I'm not
talking
saying it
about the
right.
same person.
Yeah.
We're talking about the same person. So if you're
Yeah.
an audiobook person, Rodel Ituraldo will sound familiar to you. When I read this name, it definitely comes across as Rodel Ituralde. Like I would have read it the same way that Tristram has read it. So, Rodel, would you kind
Yeah.
of consider him like a Napoleonic figure? Kind of that's who he's based on, do you think?
That you know what? That was never my vibe, other than he's like god tier, like military skill. Um, and I'll tell you why not. Because
Okay.
he's not. The reason I don't think so is he's not revolutionary. Um, he is incredibly loyal. He's been raised by the king, and so actually, he reminds me a bit more of like sort of almost like Augustus and Caesar. That
Okay.
he has this loyalty to the king of Aradoman, and he wants to respond to his commands, but he also has like a kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Because of where we meet him, he is currently being like a guerrilla fighter, right? He's
Mhm.
organizing the Domani warriors and like sowing chaos and like fighting and trying to like outthink the Dragon Sworn, but also Sean Chan and working against multiple enemies at once. And he does show obviously the military brilliance of someone like Napoleon, but you can say that of all five of the great captains. Um, so I don't know who I would compare him to in realistic military, really, because he's just he has to do something that's quite different. One of the things I just want to bring up, I just mentioned it to Dusty before this was the character who most gripped me in Crossroads of Twilight. He's not in it loads, but when I was introduced to him in this chapter, I was like, oh, he's one of the five great captains. This guy's amazing. Wow. Got right into it. You know, he's nicknamed the Wolf, which is just an awesome nickname, and his men really admire him. But one of the things that's interesting is we get this vibe that he's working at cross purposes to our heroes. So he's like a good guy that we can really like, but what he's doing, he's getting messages from the king, and he's worried that maybe they're not legit. And we're like, they're totally not legit, because by now the readers have seen that every single kingdom's leadership's been overtaken. So, suspicious messages from the king. You're like, yep, this is definitely a Forsaken sending you messages. I don't know how, but it must be. And so it's cool because it's put someone who's a good guy, like we see inside his head, and we can see that he's a good man, and he's super capable, which makes us like him even more. And yet he's potentially against what our heroes are trying to achieve, and in an area that we've heard nothing about. Interestingly, to him, the Dragonsworn are as big a problem as the Shanchan. And we know in the back of our heads that last time we saw Perrin, he was with a pack of Dragonsworn and having a real problem with them. So it's really interesting how Jordan here goes, yes, I'm following my main characters, but look, there's a whole world out there that continues on. And can I just say, I think Jordan does it better than maybe, because he's in a book and he can, than maybe the Marvel series does, when Captain Marvel shows up and says, the reason I can't help you with all my powers is the universe is a big place and there's big things going on. You know, just like the reason that the like hand wave, right? Whereas is something here that says, actually, that makes complete sense that the Dragonsworn are a problem here. It makes sense that one of the reasons the Shanchan aren't sweeping across lands is they're being resisted by people other than Rand. And I think this inclusion is very good. It's probably my favorite part of the prologue. What do you think? What's your impression of this guy?
He seems like he's on top of his game as far as like being informed and making like decisions to like he's a little similar to me and the captain commander of the children, except he doesn't have like kind of zealous motivation.
Correct.
He's very pragmatic, but he doesn't have these ulterior zealous motivations kind of driving him. He's doing things for the right reasons in this case. And I do see those men like love him. They're super loyal to him. And the reason why I came up with the Napoleon thing is because they kind of describe him as a shorter man, but has a nice command.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Despite being short.
No, that's absolutely true. They do say that. You know what? That I had forgotten that he is like very commanding, but specifically mentioned as like not having great stature. And in fact, we don't really see him often physically fight either, because Napoleon wasn't renowned for being a great personal physical fighter. He was a tactical and strategic genius. And I guess you're right in that way. Iturralde is very similar, right? He's not shown as being a individually awesome fighter like someone like Lan is shown of being, or even Matt, right? Matt's a military genius, but Matt is shown to be an individual one-on-one fighter of the highest level.
Right.
You know? So yeah, that
it's not like he just has that advantage of having so many lived experiences. You know, so it's not like a single person can be a tactical genius and have like the fighting prowess of somebody who spars every day for years. You know, you got to pick one path.
But you know what? I like that about him. I like that.
Well, that's why I'm saying Matt is cool, because he can do that. That's his superpower among the three, is that he has all these lived experiences, so that he doesn't have like, I guess his power is luck in a way, but his main power is his lived experience and him using that to like his greatest capability.
Yeah. Basically, as with everything in the Matt character, he cheated.
Yeah.
he got to have a young man's body, but inside his brain, filling all his lost memories, which he got from doing something stupid and picking up the dagger. That's why he lost all those gaps, because he did something stupid, and then he gets them filled with all these genius military leaders throughout time. So he gets to be a young guy with full youth, but he also gets to have the memories of all these geniuses throughout time. So he's like an old brain in a young body, and fully in denial, as Matt should be. Always.
So another thing interesting about Rodel is that he's willing to unite forces that aren't under his command directly.
Correct.
So he knows that with the forces he has now aren't sufficient to overcome the Shanchan threat. and he knows that he can probably take advantage of the Dragon's Sworn in some form or fashion because they, if you think about it, the Shan Chan have to be kind of the biggest enemy to Rand at the moment,
Oh,
or one of
100%.
the. So all he has to do really is convince these people who are supposed to be loyal followers of Rand
But
that
obviously he's
hey,
been, but it's what you say is really interesting that he's open-minded enough to try it because, like I say, he's kind of been against them. Like he's had to deal with the Dragon Sworn in his homeland, but he's willing to work with them to fight against the Sonchan while he's receiving conflicting orders from the man he believes he should be loyal to. It's really really tricky, and it shows that he is not constrained. He's a loyal person, but so often when we talk about loyal people, people think of people with no imagination, people who can only ever do what they're told. And Rodell shows us very otherwise, right? That he is capable of
right,
thinking outside the box. He will work with the Dragon Sworn if it works, if it's going to achieve the best outcome. And his ability to constantly redefine what he's doing is one of the reasons that all his enemies struggle to deal with him, including the Shadow. And one of the things that's interesting as well, when we see it from his point of view, we realize that he doesn't really think the Shadow is a thing. Like he
mhm,
doesn't really think that Trollocs or like Myrddraal or whatever are going to attack from the north. That's not on his head. He's
mhm,
thinking about human beings, the Shan Chan, the Dragon Sworn, and not really considering that which of course the Borderlanders, for them, they realize that Rand's true enemy is to the north.
right.
And so it's just a real differentiation between the way people like he sees it and the way that they see it in the Borderlands.
And if I'm not mistaken, Arad Daman was one of the places that was heavily occupied by the Shan Chan. So
Well,
it almost becomes as that's one of his main priorities is to deal with them.
yeah, well, because and I guess this is another way in which he is a bit Napoleonic, is he's a nationalist, right? He's a patriot.
Right.
Like, he's not actually in it for Randland, he's in it for Arad Doman.
Hmm.
which is cool. I think it's a character that we can really relate to, and his motivations are super clear to us. So I think he's easy to like for that reason.
Right, right, right. Okay. Were there any other characters that you want to talk about in the prologue? I know
Oh
we have
yeah,
quite a few.
I think
Who did you want to talk about next?
I think we should talk about Gabrielle and Tovine, just at least touch on them
Ah,
because
okay.
of because that's like a completely different situation to anything we'd seen right until now.
Yes, and they're kind of with Logain in
In a
a what?
reverse water situation,
Yes.
and
So,
that's never been seen. This is the example.
yeah, so we get to see kind of the mechanics of that in particular, where Logain has captured these Aes Sedai.
Yep.
One of them, I think, is a brown, and she's kind of enjoying the experience because it's a new experience, and she's a brown, so of
Yeah.
course she loves it.
She's Gabrielle's kind of taking it as a chance to study.
Right. So
But
she's kind of loving it in a way. And is she the one that's already hooked up with Logain, or was it the other one?
um, basically, she's the one who's yeah. They're both adjusting because actually Logain's bonded them both. But
Hmm.
she's the one who's like we found out in the last no not last book might have been book 8 when Tovine was leading the Reds in. She's the one who got taken out, and then Logain kisses her, and that's when he makes the bond with her. That was the
Right.
last time we saw her. Gabrielle is her like sister warder, and she talks to Tovine in this, and it looks like Gabrielle may be in a semi-romantic relationship with Logain now.
Right.
Though it does imply it's an unequal one, like with an Aes Sedai and her ward, rather than like
Right.
as a pairing. And but it is interesting because she doesn't seem to be horrified by it at all. So it obviously
Right.
isn't rape, is what I'm saying. It's obviously
Yeah.
not. And but she's thinking we need to fight the shadow. But it seems clear that Tovine is, even though she's the red and not necessarily happy about it, that she's adjusted too, because in this chapter we find out something interesting, which is that Logain is back at the tower, right? The Black Tower.
Mhm.
And we're not really sure at this point where Logain stands. Okay. Like it's weird now that we've finished the series and we know a lot about Logain, but
Mhm.
at the time, readers didn't know if Logain was gonna, be like really evil now that he's got his powers back.
Right.
And like this is like, oh, Logain's like we only just found out Logain was back at the tower. Now it's like, what's he gonna do? And then we find out that Tane is basically going to let him go and recruit.
Mhm.
And interestingly, Tovine says to Gabrielle, who's like basically sharing Logain's bed, like, make sure he takes us. And so it shows that the Aes Sedai are never harmless. Even though they've been made warders and they're technically captives, they are finding ways to message the highest of the red. They're finding ways to manipulate Logain and build up his faction. They're finding ways to still pursue the Dragon Reborn, even within this station. I really like that because we often see the Aes Sedai in positions of dominance. But what this shows is that even when they're in a position where they're, if you like, on the back foot, they're still clever, smart, powerful women who can turn the situation to their advantage. Like Gabrielle's choice to study Logain and to learn about the water bond in this new way. So I think that part of the chapter is quite interesting.
So one of the questions I had about Logain's bond, it seems that he has a lot of power over what they can do.
Yeah.
So is he able to? He's basically able to limit any aggressive channeling that they might do. He can also preempt any emotions that they have by feeling it through the bond.
Correct. So
So
if they were intending to betray him, right, he'd feel that.
right. So it's pretty interesting. And we always see Tovine struggling with that in particular, trying to mask her feelings about what's happening from Logain, because he can detect that through their bond, whether they're anxious or upset or whatever it may be.
Agreed. And but I really like it. I think it's very clever, and I think that the comparison between the two is very good as well. But we should also just touch on extremely briefly. You mentioned how Iterald is different from the Captain Commander of the Light,
Right.
Pedro Niel, and he's actually touched on in this prologue as well.
Oh yeah, because we had a POV from Amon Valda,
Yeah,
and kind of after after they get trounced by the Shan in
correct.
their own homeland, then they're kind of like on the route, looking for some possible, trying to build up their army again, right?
Absolutely. But I just wanted to ask you, Dusty, because I don't think we've ever really talked about him. What's your view on Niald, on the Captain Commander?
On the one that died,
Yeah, of the children. Yeah.
like I thought he was pretty smart and pragmatic, but it looks like the problem with him is that he got off the zealotry a bit,
Yeah, he
and
did.
the other commanders saw him as being blasphemous in the way he was operating. but he was just being like completely pragmatic and operating probably in a better way because he had to struggle with what's his name, the little sneaky spy master.
I love
Uh,
him, Bulwer.
yeah, he had to struggle with the information that Bulwer gave him, and you could always see that there was like this internal struggle with him trying to explain away things as being something of the evil Aes Sedai's doing,
Mm.
instead of looking at the practicality of what it was according to Bulwer. But it did look like at times he did see the light in that he was being pragmatic. It was, I thought he could have been a good character if he kept along a bit, but he could not last in the organization as it became as zealous as it became eventually.
Yeah,
Um,
it's interesting because I think he could have. I think he could have like one of the one of the things about Pedro Nial is he's one of the five great captains, right? So he
mhm.
is on a military level right up there with um, the with Iterald or with my goodness, I can't remember anyone's name anymore. Garth Brine, etc. So he is a military genius, and I think
Davram Bashir, is he one of them?
I think Davram Bashir is not named, but is basically considered a great general. I think it's Iterald, Pedro Nial, Garth
Gareth
Bryn.
Brand.
There's the guy right at the beginning. I want to say Estar. Oh, I can't even pronounce his name. He's the leader of the
Oh,
Shinar.
yeah, it's what's his
Ooh,
name?
no, it's not Ingtar. That's the guy who turns evil.
It's the guy that got killed in the TV show but didn't
But
die.
doesn't in the
But didn't die in the books.
but anyway, there's five of them. And they're massively renowned, and he is named constantly as one of the five great captains. But I one of the reasons I love that character, right, is because of what you just said, his pragmatism. I think he was a believer in the light. I think he genuinely was. I think a lot of the children are. A lot of the
Hmm.
children are. But one of the things that Jordan shows us is that you can have people who are believing in something that is real. Because remember, in Randland, it's not the same as here on Earth. Like the light and the dark are very, very real things that are not really in doubt. Like once you start seeing, like the dark one is there, right? He speaks to people straight up, like brings people back from the dead. So it's not so much a matter of faith in Randland, it's more fact. Okay. You don't
Hmm.
have to decide if you believe or not in the darkness. Like it is there. Um, and like obviously the one power is again proof in Randland in a way that we don't have on Earth. So the children of light are correct that there is a light and that the dark friends need to be opposed, and actually that they need to be opposed violently because
Hmm.
pacifism won't do it. But they've descended into zealotry, and we see that in our
Right.
own world, right? That lots of
Of
good ideas
course.
are, but the thing is that a lot of people who we think I don't agree with them, often it's not that we don't agree with them as people, it's we don't agree with the most zealous of their sects, whatever
Hmm.
it is, whether it be political, religious, or philosophical. And so I think I kind of wish that Jordan had been able to have Niall kind of start reforming the White Cloaks. Though obviously what he
Hmm.
does is he gives that to Elaine's brother instead to do. But
Right.
the thing is, I understand why he didn't now as an older person, because one of the things he's showing is what you just said is that people will have tried to reform anything. Like we know that in Nazi Germany there were men in the German military who tried to assassinate Hitler, who
Yeah.
tried to reform their own country from within, and
Hmm.
and died for what they tried to do. And so like that's the point, is that there's no group that are just universally evil. There are people who are trying to do different things and maybe misguided. And it's so interesting that the only people who could kill him were his own team. And you think,
Right.
Anyway, I just thought that was worth bringing up because I think that's got a valuable and powerful theme. And now, of course, who do we see
We
as the
got a
captain?
couple. Oh yeah, so who is it? Valda's not the captain, is he?
The worst possible person.
Yeah, Valda in the TV show is like the murderer, torturer man. And in this book, he's not like there are two characters that kind of embody that, what they showed on the TV show.
Yeah,
Valda is kind of
a combination. In the TV show, he's
yeah,
both of them, isn't he? He's a swan in a way as well. The way
yeah,
he's
so Valda, as we could see, he's no great captain.
no, no, he is not.
He is no great captain. I guess if we see like basically that this decision kind of doomed the Children of the Light as an organization.
Correct.
Because I'm thinking if we still had the Captain Commander, I feel like he would have been able to anticipate the Shan-Chan threat.
But
I don't think it was something he would have been ignored.
We also know because when he dies, he was just getting a message from Bulwer, right? And he was just making different decisions and deciding not to turn his attacks against the Aes Sedai, remember? And that's one of the things that they used as an excuse to kill him. They tricked the guy who thought he was his spy master. He's like, look, he knows where the Aes Sedai are and he's not moving against them. This proves he's a heretic. But he clearly did understand better. You're absolutely right. And he clearly would have had a better military response. And all that is wasted. And instead we have basically dark friends ruling the Children of the Light directly, which it is clear that he was not a dark friend. Even though there's many of them in the Children of the Light and it was affecting him, it is clear that he was not one. And his removal is a disaster for the forces of the light. And we can see that by what's happening here, where now the leader of the questioners and the captain and commander are just going, yeah, let's go and do this. And they're united in basically evil. And but like no longer having to work around each other. Well, they kind of still do, but now it's like two evil people trying to get one-upping each other rather than actually having anything good happen. So just thought I'd bring that up because I think that's a really important parallel, and we're finally seeing here the damage of taking him out, even though he's been an antagonist in the series.
Did you want to talk about some of the assassination attempts on some of these characters in the prologue?
No, you take it, Dusty. Go for it.
Yeah, because I remember when I read this, I was like really sad when they found out that Dobrain was like dying and someone had killed him.
Yeah.
Because we do get lucky though, because he's like barely alive, and someone shows up. I think Samitsu. She's like a super healer.
I think it's her POV, isn't it?
Yeah, she shows up and heals him. She's supposed to be like super talented healer. I think she's the one who addressed Rand's wound when he got stabbed by the dagger,
which cannot be
initially.
Healed.
Yeah. She was an initial healer for that, which that got passed off to the old guy. What's his name? The guy that's kind of like he's basically like a healer savant.
He is.
He's Samitsu's high level, but she's even like floored by his ability.
But I think one of the key things here is that she's amazing. I think she's a savant in her own way, but the problem is that the men are using a different power. So they find different things possible. And no one has told. One of the things that Jordan was trying to suggest is that the Aes Sedai is super powerful, but they have constantly taught that there's one way to do things. and they've
Hmm.
hidden when they've come up with cool new weaves. They've kept them to themselves, like when Leandrin works out her special kind of compulsion, or
Hmm.
even
The
Moraine, who's
blues. The blues
even
have
Moraine,
their special weave.
yeah,
Yeah.
Moraine's shown as a hero, right? She's like one of the protagonists that we're supposed to love, but she
Hmm.
deliberately hides her eavesdropping weave so that only she can use it. So that's the problem, is they've all been hiding these weaves from each other instead of spreading knowledge, because it's all about one-upmanship with them. The men of the Black Tower haven't had any time for that crap. So they've just learned to blow stuff up and heal wounds. And so whenever Flynn's tried something, they've just let him. And remember, the men have learned primarily by forcing, which is actually really dangerous
Hmm.
with Saidar. If you try and force Saidar, it destroys you, it consumes you. You have to surrender to
Right.
it. But with Cyrene, you've got to take it by the scruff of the neck and make it do your will. And so the men have accelerated in sort of darting bursts of power. And I think that's one of the things that Flynn has gone sharply upwards, has tried things that no Aes Sedai would even try. And because he's
Right.
using a different power, they can do things with Saidin that the women couldn't do with Saidar, but he also
Mhm.
probably couldn't do half of what she can do because he doesn't have the expertise, the finesse, or the experience she does. But yeah, it is cool. And I love the way he suggests that both the men and the women in this series are just amazingly powerful, but that the greatest things they can do can only be done together.
Mm.
And remember, Robert Jordan is clearly a big fan of things like marriage and the idea of a man and
Mhm.
a woman united being better. And it's a theme that runs throughout the entire series, right?
Right. Yes, it's like kind of the major theme of
It is the major
both
theme.
both halves coming together are more powerful than them acting on their own.
Correct. That
Like the
I would
whole
say that
magic
is the
system revolves around it.
correct. Absolutely.
So when it comes to Dobrain, do they explain in this prologue why he was targeted specifically?
I
Because Loyal makes kind of like a suggestion that they were looking for something specific, and it wasn't really Dobrain that they were trying to kill, like
surely it's
purposefully,
meant to
but
be. I think it's meant to be Matt. Like I think everything's
uh,
aimed at Matt, and he just gets in the way.
okay. Uh,
That is what I've assumed. I'm sorry, my computer has gone crazy, so I may drop. Like my screen's gone black. So if I drop,
uh-oh.
I'll come. Like it's still working, but like my screen is just black. I can't see a thing. So apologies.
Uh-oh. Okay. No problem. We'll work through it here. Were there any other characters from? Well, I know Davram Bashir's wife was also had an
Yeah.
assassination attempt on her in this prologue. Um,
Anyone who tries
but
to assassinate Davram Bashir's wife is an idiot. That woman is made of rock.
yeah,
She's
the assassins got got killed. Like they're all dead.
the dead, sir. They're all dead. No, like she is just crazy. That woman, she is absolutely crazy, and like the way that their marriage works is just so bizarre. I love it.
Yeah, I think it's just a Saldaean culture thing.
Yeah,
It's funny whenever Elias tries to explain that and help Perrin with his relationship, and it's so alien to Perrin. But Elias is more of a worldly figure, so he kind of knows how different cultures operate.
yeah.
If Perrin is completely befuddled. But I always find that pretty amusing. I find it amusing because I kind of feel like I have a similar relationship to my wife, where kind of we're not like openly hostile to each other or anything,
No,
but we kind of like swipe at each other sometimes.
I think most couples can relate. to some extent.
Yeah.
And one of the things I love about Jordan, I know occasionally you see people who only touch on a series and then make a swipe at it, and they should be careful making those swipes where there's people who've actually read the stuff. And often one of the things I've seen people who didn't read the series very well, maybe got turned off it in early books, are like, oh, Jordan's got no decent female characters. All they do is like tug at their clothes and fold their arms under their breasts and tug their braids. And you're like, oh, look at the complexity and the variety of the women in these books and their relationships. Many of them have no relationships with men at all, which is fine and good. It shows that you don't need that. Many of them do, and their relationships are very diverse. So, like Egwene's relationship with men is very different from the way Nynaeve takes it, which is absolutely different from Elaine, which is absolutely different from like a Domani style. And like when we look at the different cultures, they have dominant styles, but they are not cookie cutter. So like the way Fail reacts is a little bit like her mom, but it isn't the same. And certainly Perrin is no Bashir. and like it's great to see those different dynamics. And I know that it's been said that Rafe's not really going to do properly because he doesn't like it, the polygamous marriage with Rand, at least not as properly like it is in the book, because he says it makes him uncomfortable. But actually, I know that polygamy is against the law, etc. But I think actually it's a really interesting thing to explore in these books, where the culture is, the ideal is polygamous and there's no problem with it.
I think it should be at least touched upon.
I think
it's not like.
Yeah, I think they're all going to be interested in him. I just don't think
they're just going to be in different relationships at different times.
No,
there's going to be breakups, or
I think he'll just have them not get married.
Okay.
Because interestingly, in the current world that we live in, it is absolutely fine to sleep with 20 women. It's just not fine to marry 20 women.
I see.
Yeah, and so I think I don't know. Like, I'm not Rafe's buddy, but that's just the vibe when he's been asked about that. I know it's something that he's gonna still do. He's still gonna have him interested in Min, Elaine, and Avienda, but he's definitely said that he's not comfortable with portraying it the same way it is in the books. That he's going to have to snip and cut a little bit, and I don't know exactly how that will play out. I'm not in his head, and he only has like 8 episodes a season to work with, but I wouldn't be surprised if he just doesn't have them get married, and therefore makes it more of a boyfriend girlfriend thing that it's never quite sure who he's going to end up with, and of course then they can say he doesn't really end up with anybody. But actually, anyway, the only reason I brought that up is that I think in the books, Rand's multiple relationships don't come across to me as just wish fulfillment. I mean, there is some wish fulfillment in there, right? To have 3 amazing relationships that all tick different boxes. Like Elaine is the princess, beautiful, generous, a great leader, intellectually astute. You've got Min, who's that almost tomboyish girl who really gets him and his friend almost more than his lover, who like is spunky and has his back and understands what it's like to live on the streets. And then he has the other one who's this exotic foreign wife who could kick his trash, and who, like, he can use the power, but is like, she's the wild woman, right? Avienda. And so you've got the princess, the wild exotic, and the girl next door. And he gets to have all 3. But the book goes through again and again to show you that it's not, at least from Rand's point of view, it's not just wish fulfillment. It is that he's genuinely fallen in love with 3 women who genuinely fell in love with him. And he feels bad, kind of like, how do I give them all a proper treatment? This isn't fair. and it's them who have to sit him down and tell him how things go. And
Right.
but I think it's really cool to explore how a main character like Rand would react to different kinds of romantic opportunities, and they all romance him in a very different way. The way he finally gets together with all of them and the way he starts his relationship with all of them is different in each case. I think that's really cool. I think it's really interesting, and I actually think it's quite well developed in the series. So anyway, I don't know how I got sidetracked on that, but what I'm saying is the romance arcs I quite like, and they're very varied, and there's lots of them, and I think that's all to the good. But anyway, we probably should move off. But by the way, when you said why did your brain die, I said they were probably trying to kill Matt. Obviously, I meant Rand. Sorry.
Rand.
I
Okay.
said Matt, but obviously he's nowhere near Matt. I don't even know if Matt's met him. So I meant Rand.
Okay. All right. Were there any other characters from the prologue you want
No,
to talk
I don't
about?
think so. Oh, just the prologue also reminds us that in the tower they're hunting Black Asha. Point made.
Right. And that's
Yeah.
still continuing to happen.
And it will continue for a long time. It seems to take forever for that to happen.
All right. So in this beginning section, there's a couple character arcs that we are dealing with. Do you want to talk about Matt first?
Yeah, let's do Matt. So Matt is escaping from the Shongshan-occupied Abu Dhar. We talked about him a lot in the last book, that he was basically the love slave of the queen and the mate of her son.
He cared about her too. And then she got killed, so that was pretty sad.
Yeah, it was, and it's shown that like she was not a bad person. Like she maybe she definitely treated Matt unfairly, but like she's not like she wasn't of the shadow, not even close. She cared about.
She definitely cared about. She cared about him.
Yeah, and she cared about her nation as a queen must, and she definitely cared about her son. So yeah, her death is harsh, but one of the things that's interesting is it's about the escape. So the key things about the escape is he's kidnapped Tuan.
And her handmaiden, who is like a super badass fighter.
But the readers don't know that. The readers at this point, they know that Tuan's more important than Matt understands. We know that Tuan's like super high up. Yes. Matt doesn't know that properly. So he's just kidnapped her because she got in the way when he was on his breakout. He doesn't realize what he has. And her
Surah, or what's her name, does
Seleucia.
No, the other Shan that's with them. That's Domon's mate. What's her name?
Eagan.
Yeah, she knows who she is, and she's like, "Oh crap, what's wrong with you, Matt?"
Yeah, but they only realize that like later, right?
Right.
And in that, and one of the cool things is as well, and I do love this, is that in that weird thing that the Shongshan do, Eagan can't officially recognize Tuan because she still has lowered the veil. Right. So Eagan totally knows that she's the daughter of the Nine Moons, but can't actually say it because Tuan's like, I'm not her at the moment. You're like, dang it, you can't do that. But like, and that's just such a clever device by Jordan. But I love the fact that Matt accidentally kidnaps his future wife without realizing it. And I just think that's absolutely beautiful. I love a kidnapping storyline. I adore that. I'm a sucker for it. But I also think
I know at this point, though, Matt does know that it's his future wife.
Well, doesn't that get revealed like only when they meet Eagan, right? Because I don't think Tuan says she's the daughter of the Nine Moons. I think it's Eagan that reveals that.
Right, and that happened in the last book.
Oh, did it? Is that the very end of Winter's Heart?
Yes.
And then he goes,
right when he captures her, he's like, I'm going to make you my wife.
Three times. Three times.
Yeah.
All right, so he does know then that she's important. He doesn't know that like she's basically the empress in
No,
waiting.
he doesn't know that, but he knows that it's his future wife according to prophecy.
And they also know that Seleucia is her maid. Now the thing is, we know that Seleucia is like her mate, but we don't know. Like the readers have never seen Seleucia kick anyone's trash. Yeah,
No, not yet. Yeah, not
it's been
yet.
implied that she's useful, but we've never like seen her do anything. And so that's one of the fun reveals of this book is when Seleucia finally kicks someone's trash. And like, oh crap,
Well, I think Seleucia actually made a threat to Matt, but she made it in the guise that, but Tuon said that I can't do that or something like that. So she's definitely been boastful, as if she could defeat Matt in combat, but she's also said that, but I have to abide by my lady's wishes, which is like Tuon told her, you're not to beat this guy up, even though I know you're capable of it or whatnot. It's kind of implied, but we actually don't know her ability, but we do
not until she
know,
does
like,
it.
yeah, not until she does it, but it's implied that, she's being held back by Tuon. We don't know if this is a boast of, her being a braggart and having no ability, or if there's something to stand behind those threats or not at this point.
But anyway, one of the things that they do is they decide to hide in a circus.
Val and Lucas circus again. I know a lot of people hate this circus.
Yeah, we'll summarize it. What would you say is the key points of the circus experience for you?
The main reason they're with the circus is because they're trying to do the opposite of what they think the Shanshan will think that they're doing. So
and
the
that's
circus
totally
is,
correct.
yeah, the circus is staying relatively close to where they had fled, and they are assuming because the circus is in good standing with the Shanshan that whoever Luca would never jeopardize that good standing by harboring fugitives. But Matt's rich too, so he can get Luca some. I think he's paying for this whole
He
thing.
definitely pays, but it's also implied that Luca has the hots for isn't it Nynaeve?
Yeah, but Nynaeve's not here.
So was that another time? Because we come
Well,
across
the first time we come across the circus is when the girls are fleeing, and yes, Luca definitely is enamored by Nynaeve.
Yeah. So in this time it's money,
because this time Val and Luca actually has a mate now. It's like some other woman.
Would that stop him? Would that stop him? That's what I want to know.
I don't know. If Nynaeve came back, I have no idea if that would stop him or not. But if Lan was along, I don't think he would want to mess with that.
Thanks, Jay. And so, anyway, the key things about the circus is it is a good idea. It makes complete sense to me, especially considering the circus has been brought up before. Like I said, as I just got confused there, that it's a great place to hide. We know they had an elephant with them before, so basically we know that they're going to be seen as friendly to the Shanshan because of what they did for their stranded person. But one of the things about the circus is there is a level of threat because we know that everyone's looking for Tuan, and we know if they find her, they're in Shanshan lands and they'll get dismayed. And it's not actually the circus, but this happens at the same time. We're introduced to basically one of my favorite minor characters, who is Furik Kared. I don't know how you pronounce it in the book, like those of you who've heard the audio, but like basically the leader of the Death Watch Guard on this side of the ocean. And he is just freaking badass. I love him. I love the Death Watch Guard entirely. I wish we got more of them in the series. when I wrote my own version of On the Road to Tarmangaiden, they had a much bigger role because I just think the Death Watch Guard are freaking awesome. I love the fact that they wear like a green that's so dark it's like black. It reminds me of 40K Dark Angels. I just think he is just the biggest badass. And like one of the things that when we get inside his head is we realize that he has like a really close, loving relationship with Tuon, even though he would never treat her that way because she is who she is. Like he genuinely has known her since she was a little child, gave her a doll, basically saved her from assassins when she was a kid. And we find out that a seeker for truth is like basically he's like, I know everything and I'm investigating this, and he wants to know about what's going on with the Aegon, and there's all this pressure. And what you realize is even the Death Watch Guard, even Tuon, could be taken down by a seeker for truth. They like represent basically like almost like an inquisition that can just ignore all law. And again, I think that's another thing that we never really got to see them really ever do their thing. I would have loved to see like that happen. But what I'm saying is, well, why do I bring up the Seeker for Truth and Kared? Well, one is because Kared's amazing. What a great character. But we know a bit like with Iturald that he's a good person. We totally get that he's totally loyal to Tuon, but he's gonna hunt her down, and there's a real chance that he will kill our heroes trying to do the right thing. So this is someone, but also if they defend Tuon and kill him, we're going to be gutted too because he is a really good guy, and like it's like how's this going to happen? And so he decides to take the Death Watch Guard to go find her. So you've got this kind of tension of the Death Watch Guard are coming, they're hidden in the circus. If they're found, what's going to kick off? And that's really good tension for the circus period of time. Another thing that happens in the circus period of time that we get to explore is Aes Sedai, who are recovering from being Damane because they rescued a bunch of them on their way out. And so we get to see the idea of how do you recover from that? And the Aes Sedai having a power struggle with Mat. And as someone who doesn't have the power but has a fox head medallion. And so that's also an interesting dynamic, seeing them trying to figure out, like, he's saved their lives, and they kind of try and reassert the fact that, well, we're Aes Sedai. And it's kind of interesting, like, that power struggle, which is another huge theme of the men versus women, men and women together theme that we talked about before. So I would say those are my main points, that sort of imminent threat of the Gardeners, which is what they call the Death Watch Guard, who are Ogier, and the Death Watch are coming for you. They're hiding in this sort of stupid caravan. They've got the best thing in the world, and they can't. They have, but you know what? That's absolutely what spy work would be like. You know, sometimes you just got to lie low.
Yeah, and Valen Luca is feeling the heat too because he has horses and things are for now not being touched with the army, but he sees that there's an increasing hunger for horses and things, so he kind of wants to get out of town before all of his horses and things get snatched up. So they're going to be on the move pretty soon, or away from the action to try to get away from things. So we'll see what's up with these characters in next time we talk. But which group did you want to talk about next?
Should we do the interminable search for Fail?
I guess so. If you want to go into that one.
Well, just again, one of the things about the search for Fail, I think, like, one of this has the same problem and the same asset as the circus stuff does. I think the circus stuff makes complete sense. They do need to hide. It's a perfect place to hide. It's been plotted previously, so it makes sense. It has good follow-on, but it feels a bit boring because you're like, we want Mat to get back to the army. We want to see two-on a match relationship progress. And instead, it's just a bit of character work and something that's maybe a bit realistic and boring because of that. The chase for Fail makes complete sense too. And if you've ever read The Lord of the Rings, it reminds me a little bit of Frodo and Sam going to Mordor. Yeah? Just constantly going, but never getting there, it feels like. And but the thing is, those interminable chapters actually give you the feeling that Perrin is having. Jordan makes you feel like Perrin feels. Like, oh, I just want to get there. I just want to rescue. I want it to be over. And we never do. And one of the chapters, I don't know which one it is, but one of those chapters in this Perrin slog is called The Forging of a Hammer. And that's what this is doing. It's hardening Perrin. It's banging him down like a hammer on metal, toughening him up. And we're going to see Perrin get to his hardest point in this.
Book, yes, for sure.
Yeah.
And one of the things I want to say about Perrin too is like there's so many conflicting things that he has to deal with, like his loyalty towards Fael and his mission that he's on for Rand.
Yeah.
And the possible betrayal of people in his party.
Correct.
What is Masima doing talking to the Shan-Chan? There's like so many things that he's worried about.
Yeah.
And that he's kind of putting everything on the back burner to get Fael back.
And of course,
he's like super paranoid in this mode where he's losing some trust in some individuals, but gaining some trust in others, like Fael's crew that she had that were kind of like her guard.
Yeah, her new warrior lodge.
Her warrior society, or
her warrior society that she set up without permission. Oh, Fael. Fael doesn't ask for permission, nor does she ask for forgiveness.
Well, that's Fael.
That is Fael.
But we do, in this early portion of the book, like the tension does build up. Like there's a particular Aes Sedai he doesn't trust because she's meeting Masima behind his back and he doesn't know what they're talking about. He finds out from one of Fael's agents that Shan-Chan had been meeting with Masima.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on in the background.
Berylane, we should mention. Is that right? I have not mispronounced
Berylane, yeah, Berylane. That's how they pronounce it in the book.
Yeah, Berylane.
Or the audiobook, at least.
But Berylane is obviously complicated, right? Berylane is super hotness.
She's still got the hots, and she's still got the hots for Perrin.
Yeah, and she is described as, I think, I mean, if my brain recalls correctly, I think Berylane is basically the hottest woman who doesn't have the one power on her side in the entire book.
Well, I always thought in my mind that Berylane was like she would be second in line to Lanfear in hotness. That's kind of how they describe her.
But yeah, it is how they describe her exactly. And like, because Elaine and Aviendra and Min are all good looking, but none of them are described as basically leaving all other women in the shade. And Berylane, when she walks into a room, is clearly meant to be super hot. And when she was in that other woman's court, she like deliberately dressed Berylane in drab clothes because she was just so freaking hot that it made her look bad. And like maybe Grendel. I mean, but Grendel uses the power, so it's not really fair. But clearly Lanfear is meant to be the hotness.
Even though she does use the power, but I think there are points where when she's like her normal self, she's kind of aged a bit more. Yeah, but she's still hot.
But she'll have the ageless look, right? Oh no, she won't. She hasn't.
But she's not on the Oath Rod. She doesn't have any Oath Rod.
So purely
I don't
young.
know. Yeah, the dark friend, like the ones that are linked to the dark one, I don't think age either.
No. But like, I think that's one of the cool things about Perrin is like Matt has his band of the Red Hand, and like Perrin's got his like Two Rivers men, but it's what you said. He's got so many different factions he's working with. You know, Aram is particularly loyal to Perrin, or at least appears to be, but is also part of the Dragon Sworn.
Right.
Berylane is like Perrin's freaking pain, but also a great ally to him, and she is really politically savvy. And while Fail is missing, Berylane is like, in a way, in her place, which is of course not where he wants her to be, but also where he needs her.
Right.
So it's like Perrin has all these people who he needs, but who are bad for him, potentially, or complicated. And like he wants the Two Rivers men in a way to go home and be safe, but actually he needs them more than ever. And you know, Elias is there, but who he can totally rely on. But Elias also is like a little bit of a rogue agent because he doesn't really obey anybody, and like he is the definition of lone wolf, and like so no one fits in anywhere. And so I love the way that Perrin kind of has things work, and he just wants to have a quiet life living in the Two Rivers with his family, and he's not allowed it because of the situation that they're in. And
Right.
it is super cool. And they finally, of course, find the shadow and have to find a way in. And one of the things that we see in this book is that Perrin, because of everything that's happened, because of how stressful things are, and all the different people who are pulling on him, he goes right down to basically torturing, like preparing to, like chopping someone's hand off to get him.
Yeah, that does happen later in the book.
Yeah,
and we'll get into super detail on that one. But yeah,
but we can see it's this
he
stuff
gets
now.
desperate.
It's this stuff now that's going to drive him to that, right? It's this stuff now. It's
right.
not,
He's under an immense amount of pressure.
correct. He's being hardened.
Immense. Right. He's not getting hardened to Rand's level of hard,
No.
but he's definitely being tested.
Well, no one's hardened to Rand level. Like Rand almost becomes a different race of being. Like he's almost not. Rand goes robotic at one point because he's
right.
He's beyond what a human being can take. And but that's one of the reasons that Rand is the person that they use as, you know, God. Interestingly, though, in the Perrin storyline, we do see the flip side. We do see Fail's side. And
yeah, we do get to see the captive side and what's going on inside the camps.
Yeah, and so one of the things is that Fail, of course, is plucky as anything, and so she's trying to break out. But obviously, she's meant to be Geishan, but obviously she's not bound by Geishan rules because she's not Aiel. And so the key things I see here is it shows that the Shadow have completely, well, not completely, but they've abandoned the true Aiel ways. And some of them are not happy with that. We also find out about Tharava, and that basically that there are people that don't want to follow Savannah, and Savannah's putting off calling a new clan chief so that she can be clan chief in his absence. And obviously can't be a new clan chief until they go back to threefold land and all this. And so we also find, of course, that Galena, who we know is super evil, like a red and a black, is here and imprisoned. And so it's really cool because you have like a get out of prison scenario where the hero, Fail, is like bribing another prisoner who's like bad news, like a mafia boss, and saying like, you help me get out. And we know that the mafia boss is bad, but the mafia boss seems to be helping. And we're like, oh, what's going to happen here? And then, of course, Galena betrays her completely. And one of the things this is good for is it makes us, it's a foil for Fail that she has to solve. But also one of the things it shows is that Fail is a constant leader. Fail's a leader in every circumstance. If you look at what Fail does, she's very similar to the character. Now, people are going to hate me for saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. She's very similar to Kaladin from the Stormlight Archive. She will band people together under her leadership, given half a chance, and she's constantly coaching people to do what she thinks is better, and pushing them forward and pushing them forward and pushing them forward. It also helps that she chose a bird name, flying, and that she is freaking, punch first, ask questions later. And think about what she did with Chafail. What did she do in the Two Rivers with the women? What did she do with Perrin's archers? She bounds people together. And so she does it here with the prisoners. She's a prisoner and she tries to make a bridge for. She pulls them together, organizes them. One of them's a freaking queen. One of them's a freaking Aes Sedai, and she pulls them. They all end up being pulled and following her because of her personality and her drive. And she's absolutely used and abused in this series, in this part here. But interestingly, even while that's happening to her, one of her captors, Roland, starts to fall for her, doesn't he?
Right. Yeah, right. I believe there's an instance in which one of the other Shido tried to take possession of her.
Yeah.
And Roland isn't having it.
Well,
and he defends her.
He does. And like one of the times when she when Galena betrays her, she gets punished. And I think she gets tied out, like, stretched out and tied to down, like just left. And he keeps her warm so that she doesn't basically lose any fingers or toes. Like he doesn't do it on purpose. No, sorry, he does do it on purpose, but he pretends he isn't. Like he warms himself near her, and because he's near her, because you know what they're like, they leave them naked all the time. That's a big thing for the Aiel. They're constantly stripping people naked.
Right.
And so he basically helps keep her alive. And so basically she owes her life to Roland, like multiple times over. But he's a bad guy, he's one of the Shido. And so it starts to make
brotherless or is he just a regular Shido?
He is I think he is one of the brotherless. I think he is. But one of the points is that he's Shido. And it makes us think, what's going to happen when she gets back to Perrin, especially if, this guy sleeps with her, which it looks like he's going to do. And, or has done. He may have already done it. But the point is that, is Perrin going to completely go berserk? Because we now see Perrin's going downhill, and we see here that not all Shido are equal, basically.
Right.
So yeah, that's that bit.
So yeah, I think one of the other things we need to mention too is that there was a confrontation between Perrin and Massima.
Yeah.
What do you think Massima's intentions were when he kind of rode up on them with I think it was like 2,000 Dragonsworn or something.
Yeah, huge numbers.
Yeah, and they kind of went to a really tense conversation. But what ended up, they ended up not fighting or not ended up killing each other. But what do you think Massima's intention was in that moment?
Well, one of the things that's interesting is that Perrin tells him not to bring a lot. And when he turns up with it all, he's like, I just came and they followed me. I didn't ask them to come. proper faking it. I'm totally obedient to the Lord Dragon. It just happens that thousands of people follow me because I'm a prophet. I think Massima is a really interesting character because I think he is insane. Okay.
Right. So I agree.
I think he's bad, but I think sometimes that he is not deliberately, he's not the Forsaken, right? He's not sitting back coldly calculating how he can get Perrin alone to assassinate him. I think at least at the beginning, he genuinely thinks he is Rand's prophet. And then he's like, ooh, but if I was next to Rand, he could tell me to do other things, and I don't quite like it. And he definitely is cult leader, right? For sure.
Right.
he's got the huge cult vibes. In that moment, I think he is thinking like, Perrin's going to force me to not do what I want to do. And if he brings me to Rand, I'm really going to lose everything because like Rand is hardcore at this time. Like Rand's totally capable of chopping off someone's head at a moment's notice. And and I can totally see him going, I don't want to be brought to heel. And so I think in that moment he's thinking, I can take Perrin here. But if he tried to, you can imagine the thousands that would die with all of Perrin's channelers, for example. And so he doesn't. And that's why later on he tries what he does in a more secluded way. But I think he was considering it. I really do. I think he was thinking, do I go? Do I push this button? Like, do I press the nuke and see what they've got? But I think he wimped out. Basically.
Yeah, because I think his hand was somewhat forced because we do know that one of File's agents stole some documents that confirmed his collusion with the Shan-Chan.
Yep.
And those documents were not returned. They were just like straight up taken.
Yeah.
So it would have been obvious that, oh, these things are gone. Like, where did they go? Maybe Perrin knows already, and I gotta take him out of the equation.
He doesn't try that yet. He does like they have the confrontation, but he doesn't actually. He isn't prepared to press the button on that yet.
Right.
And
so, for him, it's like, okay, this guy is going to become a big problem later in the book.
Yeah, totally a problem, and we can see it as the reader, right? Like ever since Massima has returned as the prophet, he has just been problem, and he's a problem for Rand. In fact, that's Perrin's mission, right? Was to sort out the Dragonsworn,
right,
and bring them to Rand, and then unfortunately lost his wife and got a little distracted.
More than a little, but yes.
Yeah.
All consumed.
And you know, in a way, it is interesting the way that Jordan chooses to show us how people react to romantic entanglements. And the thing about Perrin is the one of the three that is the most loyal, like as a person. Like he's the one who wants to go back to the Two Rivers, right? And you know, they all could have gone. Rand could have gone back. Matt could have gone back, but they never do. Even though Matt's constantly complaining about how he hates nobles and he's never going to be a noble, Matt never goes back. Perrin did. And Perrin sat there and fought against the White Cloaks and stood on top of a freaking roof with a longbow and stuff. And like Perrin is deeply loyal to his homeland, loyal to Rand, and incredibly loyal to Fail. He is all in. And one of the things that Jordan shows us here is that's a really noble characteristic, but if it's taken to extremes, it can lead you to doing crazy stuff, like abandoning stuff that might have the entire world at stake to go and find your wife because you're that in love with her, when actually she's only one woman. But to Perrin, she's not just one woman. She is his world. And I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to a little bit, like when it comes to their children, for example, compared to like their loyalty to their country. Like, yeah, it's good to be loyal to your country, but like, this is my daughter we're talking about, you know? And that's very human and very relatable. And of course, with Perrin, we are immediately thinking of the theme of the pack and a wolf's loyalty to the pack. And that's, those thoughts and vibes are pursued here. And he is all consumed, and it is dangerous. He abandons some of what he should be doing as a tavern.
Morals, you know, some of the morals too.
No, you're absolutely right. And we thought, or at least I did, that Perrin was going to be the lawful good member of the team. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if you were going to tell me who was going to chop someone's arm off or something, I'd have said that was Rand, right?
Right.
I would not have expected that to be Perrin's arc.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that Jordan's saying is, in time of war, when it really comes down to it, people who never would do this kind of thing can do remarkable things.
Right.
Remember, Jordan served, right? He served in
Mm-hmm.
Nam, and he saw some people doing things that they would not have done except in wartime. And
Right.
yeah, just a thought.
One of the things that I've learned too is if you ever watch the show 24,
Yeah,
the main character's loved ones also often get kidnapped, and he ends up doing morally bad things
yeah,
because of that. And we're talking about like torture and
yeah,
killing people he normally wouldn't kill
yeah.
and things like that. So yeah, it's kind of that's like take Perrin's situation, and that's like the entire arc of the show 24 from season 1 to 8.
Yeah. Except those seasons are all one day long.
Right.
Aaron's been doing this for months. But yes, Jack Bauer, man, they broke him down hard.
All right. So, lastly, I want to just touch
We're just going to touch
lightly.
on Elaine.
Yes, and it's just
Okay.
a real light touch because it's only one chapter,
Yeah.
and it also involves kind of like what we were talking about in the very beginning with the time that this takes place.
So this is the one where we finally see that someone realizes that the cleansing's happening.
Right.
This is when
So
19-year-old Tristram went, oh, this book isn't after book 9.
yeah, this is like 10 chapters into this book that the taint gets cleansed, and Elaine's just doing her Elaine thing, being pregnant, uh,
Well,
negotiating between the different houses.
yeah, I was going to say, she's doing a bit more than being pregnant. Come on.
Well, no, I'm just saying that's part of it. She's going to have,
Yeah.
because of the pregnancy, she's been having issues with her mood. And she's also negotiating with the different houses. And, we also have the problems with her guard. But while she's dealing with all this stuff, she feels like this giant surge of Sidar off in the distance, and immediately she thinks of Rand.
Yeah.
Because she is bonded with Rand, so she knows the general direction of where he is, and
Yes.
that giant surge is coming from where he is at. So she is very, very anxious about Rand. And I think she gets talked down by Avienda because she wants to go to him immediately.
But I want to put something out there on that because
Mm-hmm.
there's something we never see, which is a wise one going through the rings.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we do have Nynaeve's experience, but we're not sure if that is really what happens to a wise one. But but we know that Avienda went through the rings, and that she saw some, like the men see the past, and it's implied that the wise ones see more, and that they see at least hints of the future.
Right.
One of Ruark's wives knew that she should marry him, for example. And Avienda implies in this chapter that if they would go to Rand now, it would be bad.
Right.
Or dangerous. And it's implied.
And I think Elaine is motivated by the prophecy that she was told by Min, because Min said that her children would be born and survive. So she assumes, like, until the time of birth, she's basically
immune,
like immortal and immune to harm. But Avienda instills in her, hey, if you do that, you don't know what'll happen to the others around you. And
Yeah,
this could put Rand in like a position to where he can be killed
yeah.
or defeated.
Or like, think about what happened to Rand's mum, you idiot. You could die and they could cut the babies out of you. Oh, look, the babies lived. Yay. Oh, look at you, dead on Dragonmount. No, I wouldn't say that to her, but yeah, I wouldn't dare. Elaine's hardcore. But I just thought that's really interesting. And I would love to see a fanfic or something of someone doing I'm sure there's loads of people doing Wise Ones going through the rings and what that would be like and what Aviendha saw that made her see that. That would be really cool.
Yeah, that'd be interesting because it took him quite a long time to cleanse the taint. So she must have been like anxious as all hell during like the whole cleansing.
Yeah,
and not being able to know what was going on over there.
And it probably messed with them, right? Because they're feeling what Rand's feeling, and like, especially when they use the power, it's a bit like they suggest it's like almost like having sex, like you feel the emotions and the rise and the explosions. And so, you're doing something like cleansing the taint when you're bonded to this guy. It's probably lucky for them that they weren't close by when he did it. But one of the things that I like is, and I know we don't get into it because this is only like a snippet here of Elaine, but we're going to get into Elaine, the Andor political system, and how you get a new queen. And I've got to say, I think this is great world building by Jordan. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but one of the things I love about Jordan and his world is that, like, in many fantasy books, you have all these different races. And so you've got the elven politics, the human politics, and the dwarven politics, and the hobbit politics. But one of the things, like, people talk about Jordan and say, well, how many races are there? Well, pretty much there's two. There's humans and Ogier. And Ogier are, like, incredibly minor. We see very little of them apart from Loyal. And then, of course, there's, like, the Shadow Spawn. But the Shadow Spawn are more like monsters than a race. And so you're like, oh, well, that's a bit boring. There's not going to be much culture and much interest there. And we're like, oh, you sweet summer child. There is like, he's made Randland like Earth. Like, each different nation has such a diverse culture, build up. Their military is different, their political systems are different, the way they handle things are different. It's great. And when you find out about how in Andor, they have queens, but to be the queen, like, the daughter heir doesn't automatically become queen. She has to have houses vote with her, and it's not like a real democracy, because it's not like everyone votes, but you have to get so many of these houses. And in the past, her, like, majority would have been utterly secure, but because of what's happened under Raven's manipulations, their house's reputation is in ruins, and she's got to build it from the ground up. And I love the fact that, like, one of her chief allies is, like, the person who could have competed with her, and instead she's on her side. And I love the fact that the servants are, like, some of her best people. And, like, her
servants are like secret, like, they're basically counterintelligence.
They are. And I love that. And they're rivals to each other, which I just love, because that's very English, right? I think Andor is quite Englandy, in, like, that sort of medieval England, that noblesse oblige, the most, medieval European of all of the nations that are described to us. And this idea of, you got to have this baron on your side, but also the fact that no matter who you're playing with in the big boy games, if your butler and your I've forgotten the name that they used, housekeeper, don't like you,
accountant or butler,
and you're utterly screwed. The upstairs downstairs thing. And that's very much a part of our cultural psyche, even though, of course, that doesn't exist anymore in modern England. It's very much part of our cultural identity that should be a thing. And it's just, I loved it here. And I love the characters that he makes with those two characters. I think they're just absolutely brilliant. And
Hmm.
I love her trying to forge with these deals. And so obviously we'll get into that as we go into next week or next time we do it.
Yeah, I'm thinking 3 weeks to a month for
Yeah,
the next one. And
because
we're gonna do it the same way too. We're not gonna go chapter by chapter. We're just going to do general themes on the plots. We covered Matt, Perrin, and Elaine a little bit. She didn't really get much of a
there's
chapter
more
until
lane to
now.
come. There's more lane to
Yeah, for
come.
sure. More Elaine, more Perrin. But yeah, I'm actually liking this format. It's a little bit freer.
Yeah,
A little bit more on point with like the major themes and occurrences and events. Like I still use my notes, but I was
yeah.
like, man, there's a lot of like stuff that I really don't need to bring up.
Yeah, and like the thing is, we still get to geek out on the key
Right.
points, and we can go into details as much as we want. But I absolutely agree that this draws attention, especially for people who are on a reread. Like not everything is equal, and when we meet you next time, we'll talk about how dark friends are a great part of the series with
Hmm.
Mellor. And like having dark friends, having people like Massima, having people like Furik Kared, who isn't a dark friend, but who is an antagonist, is so clever in this series. And it's something that Jordan does just brilliantly, absolutely brilliantly. And
Right.
in a way, I don't know anyone else who's really done it as well as he has. Where I'm thinking all the time, is that person a dark friend? And I kind of wish I could have the experience of reading having the series come out again. In a way, I don't.
Yeah.
I remember waiting forever for the Gathering Storm to come out, and like the dread of him dying during writing. But
Yeah, that
it
was definitely a concern. Like
was
I didn't
really
actually
tough.
start reading
Oh,
this series until 2012.
really? Oh,
Yes.
but like you should have been with us, man. When like Winter's Heart got released, and we were all like, "Oh, what?" And people who predicted that the taint was going to be cleansed were like, "We told you so." And it was crazy. And like all the people who didn't like about Asmodon and who killed who and like where's Grendel hiding and is Tame Demandred and all that sort of stuff. And like it's really, really interesting because we didn't know, right? We didn't know anyone could be a dark friend. Anyone could be a dark friend. Unless you had a POV from that character, they could be a dark friend. And that was something he did to us again and again. He revealed people as dark friends, and we were like, holy crap, we didn't see that coming. And some will always still have been some people who did. And that's one of the things that I just think is really amazing about the series. And I don't even think Brandon Sanderson in his series, with all his secret organizations, has managed to pull off that, like, oh my goodness, anyone could be a dark friend. In his series, it's like anyone
Yeah.
could be a world hopper.
Well, there's not enough named characters to do. Is this
The same
person a
thing.
dark friend? Is this person like there's so many named characters in the Wheel of Time, it's just crazy.
Yep, agreed. And actually, it helps Brandon's works be more accessible and
Hmm.
more quickly driven than Jordan's. But it is a cool stamp of Jordan's work, and it makes his work feel more Tolkien-esque. Um,
Hmm.
it gives it that little bit of mythology rather than just a story. Um,
Right.
yeah, there's a reason that this was my favorite fantasy series for absolute years. It still might be. I mean, the Stormlight Archive is just a special thing, but it hasn't actually finished its first arc. So, as a complete series, The Wheel of Time It's my favorite ever book series, and one of the reasons is that depth of characters, those incredible world building experiences, the sheer variety of what he achieved with his romance arcs, his military arcs, and his amazing magic system. And we see
Yeah,
here,
and then there's also the threads he left open that still allow us to speculate on things.
agreed. And I'm sure we'll get to that. As we get to the end, we'll have to do at least one episode when we finally finish the last book. We'll have to do at least one episode on things that were revealed after the books were finished.
Right.
Because Brandon Sanderson just did like a podcast on that, on just some stuff that came out after the books were actually written. So some interesting twists and turns there.
Yeah, I have not actually checked that out yet.
No, but we won't be bringing that out for months, if not years,
Yeah.
Dusty. You know,
Yeah, it's gonna
how
be
long
a
it's
while.
taken us to get even this far. Anyway,
Yeah, it's because we've been put on like a sidetrack from the show and the Lord of the Rings show and all of this like fantasy content that we didn't know was going to be bunched up so close together.
But yeah, it's all good.
All right, man. Well, I know you don't have any plugs like usual, but do you have any last words to say?
Just that the slog is only the slog because it is in many ways realistic and it's part of a gigantic series. While I say that Crossroads of Twilight is probably my least favorite book, and I think it is for a lot of people, it isn't because it is a bad book. But if you read Crossroads of Twilight on its own, it would be boring. If you read Crossroads of Twilight as a natural progression from Winter's Heart, Crossroads of Twilight makes perfect sense and fills necessary character arcs and plot points. So just that thought, because I know that some people are just like, well, you can just skip 3 books and you've missed nothing. That is not the case.
Yeah, I'm going through it. I know Andrew like finished the whole thing. Yeah, already. I'm just trying to get through it by rereading the sections that I'm going to cover to keep them fresher in my mind.
Good idea.
But so far from what I've reread, I'm not like, oh, man, this is boring. Let me get to the next thing. You know, I'm actually looking into this material and seeing some new things I didn't consider. Like the tension between Wasima and Kieran were great. Him finding the Shido camp was great. The reveal that this first 10 chapters took place before the cleansing was pretty interesting. So I'm not like hating it right now. It's probably because I know there was another book. I was like, man, this one was so slow for me. And I will probably compare it to that book. And I forget the name of the book. The book is where Rand loses control of Kalendor. Which book was that?
Yeah. That was Crown of Swords, I think.
Yeah, for me that was a little slow, but so far I'm actually liking this one better so far.
And one of the things I think this one does really well is it investigates warders really well. Like we see the reverse warder bond, we see Rand's weird warder bond with his girls. It's a good one.
Weird warder bond with
the Brigitte.
Brigitte, yeah.
It's a really good book for warder knowledge, and like I say, for lore and for sense, it's a good book for that. Anyway, we'll go more into that next time.
All right. So thank you for watching, everybody. We're going to cover the second part of this book, likely in 3 weeks to a month's time, and we'll let you know. I want to try to get Andrew to watch Arcane so we can talk about that. I've been loving the show. I think he'll like it. I tried to get him to watch Attack on Titan, and he is like, "Oh, this show sucks," which is too bad because I like it. So hopefully he'll like this one, and we'll talk about it.
He will love Arcane. Everyone likes Arcane. Arcane is just extremely well done. It's just
Yeah,
incredible.
Arcane's good. I can't see how anybody can not like it.
Not
But
someone who's got fantasy. Like Andrew will love Arcane. Trust me, it'll be fine.
all right, great. Well, thank you, everybody. Just join us next time for the next part, and you have a great night.
Ciao for now.
All right, bye-bye.